In the hierarchy of Appalachian nightmares, there is a classification system. At the bottom you have the physical animals, the bears, the cougars, and the snakes. Above them you have the cryptids, the local legends of wild men, and oversized cats. But at the very top of the pyramid, sitting in a category of absolute dread, is an entity that does not just kill you. It steals the only thing you truly own, your time. We are entering the darkest corner of Cherokee theology. We are talking about the Kalanu Ahkyeli. In English, they are called the raven mockers. Most monsters in folklore are chaotic. They attack out of hunger or rage. The raven mocker is different because it is calculating. It is an assassin of the sick. It is a witch, usually an old, withered man or woman, who has mastered the dark arts to such a degree that they have cheated death. But their immortality comes with a biological price. They cannot generate their own life force. They must harvest it from others. To understand the horror of the raven mocker, you have to imagine the setting where they strike. It is not on a hiking trail. It is not on a lonely road. It is in your own bedroom, at the moment of your greatest vulnerability. When a person in the Appalachians falls ill, when they are lying in bed, drifting between life and death, the atmosphere in the room changes. The Cherokee elders teach that when the raven mocker hunts, it takes to the sky. It transforms into a ball of fire or a streak of blue light, trailing sparks across the ridge lines. But as it approaches the house of the dying, it shifts again. It takes the form of a massive black bird. It dives from the sky with a sound that is described specifically in the oral traditions. It is not a caw. It is a sound like a rushing wind or a person diving into water. If you are the sick person, lying in a fever, you might hear this sound. To your family sitting by your bedside, it sounds like a branch scraping against the window or the wind in the chimney. But to you, it is the sound of your executioner arriving. James Mooney, the famous ethnographer who lived with the Cherokee in the late 19th century, recorded that the raven mocker is the most feared of all the Silly the Witch tribe. Even other witches are afraid of them. They are invisible to the naked eye of a normal human. They can walk into a crowded room, stand at the foot of the bed, and no one but the victim knows they are there. Their method of killing is precise and surgical, yet it leaves no mark on the skin. The legend states that the raven mocker waits until the victim is weak. Then, it lifts the dying person from the bed, spiritually or physically. The legends blur the line and throws them to the floor, but the body never hits the ground. The torture happens in the space between. The witch extracts the heart, not the physical organ, but the spiritual essence of the heart. By consuming this essence, the raven mocker adds the victim's remaining years to their own life. If a young man is destined to live to be 80, and he gets sick at 20, the raven mocker steals those 60 unlived years. The witch becomes younger, stronger, and more vibrant, while the victim withers away in seconds, dying in agony. This explains a very specific phenomenon in Appalachian death culture. Occasionally, a person who is dying will suddenly sit up in bed, eyes wide with terror, screaming that there is someone in the room, someone standing over them that the family cannot see. The doctors call it a hallucination or terminal agitation. The Cherokee call it the arrival of the Kalanu. The existence of the raven mocker introduces a terrifying paranoia into the community. Because they look like normal humans during the day, anyone could be one. That elderly neighbor who has outlived 3 generations of their own family. The stranger who always seems to know who is sick before the doctor does. They are suspects. They walk among the living, scouting for the dying, counting the days until they can feed again. In the deep hollows, this belief shaped the way people treated the sick. You never leave a dying person alone at night. Not because they might need water, but because they need a guard. The raven mocker is a coward. It prefers solitude. It prefers the dark, and it hates to be seen. The terror of the raven mocker lies in its camouflage. During the day, they do not look like monsters. They look like the pillars of the community. They are often the oldest men and women in the village, respected for their longevity. But this longevity is a lie. It is stolen time. When you look into the eyes of a raven mocker in the daylight, you are looking at a creature that might be 200 years old, sustaining its withered frame by consuming the hearts of children and the sick. Because they are invisible to the uninitiated, the Cherokee developed a specific countermeasure, a defense system. This fell upon the shoulders of the medicine man, but not just any healer could face a It required a shaman of high medicine, someone who had undergone severe fasting and ritual preparation to gain the sight. When a family suspected that a relative was being targeted, when the sick person started screaming about the man in the corner, or when the sound of heavy wings was heard on the roof, they would send for the medicine man. He would arrive quietly. He would not administer herbs or poultices. He was there to act as a sniper. He would sit in the darkest corner of the room, smoking sacred tobacco to hide his own scent from the witch. He would wait. The battle that ensued was silent and invisible to the family. When the raven mocker entered the room to steal the heart, the medicine man would use his sight to spot the intruder. The legend says that the raven mocker is terrified of being seen in its true form. If the medicine man can maintain eye contact, if he can perceive the entity and assert his will, the raven mocker is repelled. It flees, starved and terrified. But the danger does not end when the victim dies. In fact, it intensifies. The raven mocker has a secondary hunger. If they miss the moment of death, they will come for the body. This belief birthed one of the most rigorous funeral customs in the Appalachian Mountains, the 7-day vigil. After a person died, their body was not left alone for a single second. Family members, warriors, and the medicine man would form a perimeter around the corpse. They had to stay awake. To sleep was to invite desecration. The Cherokee believed that the raven mocker would return to the grave to dig up the body and consume the physical heart if they missed the spiritual one. If the vigil was broken, if the guards fell asleep, they might wake up to find the body apparently untouched. But the raven mocker is surgical. It can remove the heart without leaving a scar on the skin. The only sign that the witch has visited is that the corpse begins to rot instantly. A body that should decompose over weeks turns to dust and bone in days, if the Kalanu has fed. However, there is a way to kill them. And this is the only hope the people have. The law states that a raven mocker cannot survive exposure. If a medicine man spots one on the attack, if he recognizes the witch in their spirit, the identity of the witch is revealed. The medicine man does not need to attack physically. The act of witnessing is the weapon. Once a raven mocker has been seen and recognized by a shaman during a raid, a clock starts ticking. They have 7 days to live. The stolen life force turns against them. The community would watch. If a respected elder suddenly fell ill and died in agony within a week of a failed attack, the village knew the truth. They knew that the kind old woman who gave candy to the children was the monster that had been eating them. When a raven mocker dies, the event is not quiet. The legends say that the sky reacts. Thunder rolls without clouds. The wind screams. And at the moment of their death, all the years they stole, all the centuries of life taken from victims are released at once. It is said that if you are near the house of a dying raven mocker, you can hear the screams of their victims escaping into the afterlife, finally free from the belly of the beast. These traditions created a culture of deep suspicion in the ancient Appalachians. It meant that illness was not just biology, it was spiritual warfare. It meant that death was not a peaceful transition, but a frantic defense of the soul. And it meant that the most dangerous thing in the woods was not a bear, but the envy of the old for the youth of the young. As the 20th century bled into the 21st, the landscape of the Appalachians changed. The isolated cabins were replaced by modular homes. The dirt roads were paved. And perhaps most significantly, the location of death shifted. For thousands of years, people died at home, surrounded by family, guarded by the vigil. Today, we die in hospitals, in hospices, and in nursing homes. We have sterilized death. We have put it behind keycards and security cameras. But the Cherokee elders warn that concrete and glass do not stop the Kalanu. In fact, modern institutions might have created the perfect hunting ground. If you speak to nurses who work the graveyard shift in the palliative care units of Appalachian hospitals from Knoxville to Asheville, you will hear stories that they do not tell the doctors. They speak of a specific phenomenon that occurs just before a patient passes. The monitors are steady. The patient is stable, and then the atmosphere in the room drops in temperature. The shadows in the corner seem to thicken, to coalesce into a shape that is darker than the unlit room. There is a recurring account of a dark bird or a tall shadow seen perched on the curtain rods or standing silently by the bedside. The patient, often comatose or heavily sedated, will suddenly spike in agitation. Their heart rate monitors scream. They stare at a corner of the room that is empty to the human eye. And then they tine. The nurses call it the black man or the visitor. They treat it as a superstition, a trick of the fluorescent lights and sleep deprivation. But to those who know the old laws, it is obvious that the raven mockers have simply relocated. They no longer need to fly over ridges. They walk the sterile hallways, feasting on the concentrated suffering of the modern dying. This brings us to the most terrifying intersection of folklore and modern science, the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Medical science describes sleep paralysis as a harmless biological glitch. It is a state where the brain wakes up from REM sleep, but the body remains in a state of atonio-paralyzed to prevent you from acting out your dreams. You are awake, you are conscious, but you cannot move a muscle. You cannot scream, and almost universally, victims of this state report hallucinations. They see a shadow person or an old hag sitting on their chest, compressing their lungs, stealing their breath. The Cherokee description of a raven mocker attack is virtually identical to the modern experience of sleep paralysis. The victim wakes up. They are paralyzed. They feel a heavy weight on their chest, the which pressing down to access the heart. They feel a sense of overwhelming, predatory malice. We must ask the uncomfortable question: is the raven mocker just a primitive explanation for a biological event? Or is sleep paralysis the modern scientific label we have slapped onto a spiritual predation that we are too afraid to acknowledge? If the raven mocker feeds on life force, what better time to feed than when the soul is untethered during sleep? The Hat Man, the shadow people, the entities that millions of people report seeing around the world, they all share the same modus operandi as the Kalanu. They are parasitic. They are observers, and they thrive on the terror of the paralyzed victim. This connects to a broader, darker concept known as louche, a term used in fringe metaphysics to describe the energy produced by human suffering. The raven mocker is the ultimate harvester of this energy. It does not kill quickly like a wolf. It extends the moment of dying. It terrorizes the victim before the end, because the fear makes the life force sweeter. It is a gourmet of agony. In the modern Appalachians, the belief in the raven mocker has gone underground, but it has not vanished. In the remote communities of the Qualla boundary and the deep hollows of the Smokies, the old rituals are still whispered. When a grandfather dies, the family might not call a medicine man, but they will still refuse to leave the room. They will keep the lights on. They will cover the mirrors. They will sit up with the body, armed with coffee and Bibles, unconsciously maintaining the 7-day vigil, because a genetic memory tells them that the danger has not passed. The horror of the raven mocker is not that it is a monster. It is that it is a betrayal. It is the elder eating the child. It is the inversion of the natural order. In nature, the old die to make room for the young. In the world of the Kalanu, the young die to sustain the old. It is a manifestation of our deepest fear, that the previous generation is not looking out for us, but consuming us to extend their own grip on the world. So, the next time you are in the mountains, and you hear the sound of a heavy wind rushing through the trees when there is no storm, or the next time you wake up in the dark, unable to move, feeling a weight pressing down on your ribs, do not close your eyes. Do not assume it is a dream. Look into the corner of the room. Fight to move your finger, your toe, anything to break the paralysis. Because the thing standing over you has been waiting a very long time for this moment. And it has a lot of years left to live. As long as it takes yours.